Part 7. After the flash marriage, the character collapsed. Author, Dowby in the World. Chapter 61. Chapter 61. Something happened to Jian's mother too. She will go to the hospital soon and told Secretary Zhang that there is no need to call her if there is nothing important. Jian Yuman quickly answered the phone and asked Secretary Zhang nervously. Secretary Zhang, what's wrong? Are people from Qinjia here to cause trouble? My wife is not good. Your mother is not in the ward. According to my inquiry, she is not in the hospital. Secretary Zhang's voice was a little panicked. He was obviously caught off guard by the disappearance of Jian's mother. Finally, his wife told him to do something, but Jian's mother was not in the hospital. I don't even know how to explain it to my wife. What? My mother is missing, Jian Yuman screamed loudly. No, she left the scene not long ago. Even if the Jian family rushed to the hospital immediately, they would not be able to rush to the hospital before Secretary Zhang. Could it be that the Jian family had already made preparations for fear that she would not attend the wedding? It's so abominable. What does uncle think? Mom is her biological sister and she will have an operation tomorrow. Where did he take her? I'll drive you there. Tanyuj already guessed what happened from her expression and words, and immediately grabbed the car keys and went to the hospital with his wife. At the same time, he called Secretary Zhang to investigate the matter carefully, hoping that they could find out the cause before going to the hospital. Jian Yuman was very scared and worried about her mother's current situation. Fortunately, the hospital was not far from her home. She ran through several red lights at Tanyuj and finally arrived within 10 minutes. Jian Yuman immediately opened the car door and ran out, quickly ran into the hospital and ran towards her mother's ward. There were quarrels heard all the way in the ward, and Jian Yuman recognized that they were her uncle's family. Very good, I came just in time. I was just about to settle a score with you. Jian Yuman rushed over and kicked Jian Yunyun when she saw her. Jian Yunyun had just woken up, and they rushed to the door of her aunt's ward in an aggressive manner, preparing to capture Jian Yuman. I believe that no matter how she escapes, she will never leave her mother alone. As a result, before they even reached the door of the ward, they were blocked by several men and forced to question them a lot. Jian Yunyun knew that these men were sent by Jian Yuman, and immediately started arguing with them. After a few words of quarrel, someone kicked her back several steps. When she reacted and wanted to fight back, Secretary Zhang grabbed her hand and pushed her, causing her to fall to the ground. Madam, are you okay? Secretary Zhang asked with concern. Jian Yuman gave Secretary Zhang a thumbs up. Her boyfriend was full of strength. Jian Yuman, Jian Chengan roared at the top of his lungs after seeing clearly that the one who hit the person was his niece. Jian Chengan is fierce, but Jian Yuman is easy to bully. She has plenty of helpers now. Knowing that my mother was missing, it was probably my uncle who did it. I immediately became angry and started shooting. Uncle, where is my mother? She will have an operation tomorrow. Where did you arrange her? Jian Yuman relied on someone to help her, and she was already dissatisfied with her uncle's family. The anger she had endured for 3 years suddenly burst out. When she asked her where her sister was, Jian Chengan immediately turned around with a guilty conscience. Thinking of the bad situation she had caused today, he immediately went back fiercely. Jian Yuman, you are a white-eyed wolf. Our Jian family has raised you mother and daughter for 3 years. In order to treat your mother's illness, you asked Mr. Lu for help, but you escaped from the marriage. You even deliberately knocked Yunyun unconscious and threw her at the door, humiliating our family. You have the nerve to ask me where your mother is. I think you don't want your mother to be alive at all. Do you know what you brought us today? Mr. Lu is angry. Not only did he not give us the advance payment for the wedding dress, but he also imposed economic sanctions on us. A beloved concubine asked me for the exact time to update my article. It will be updated at 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. Normally 3 updates a day. End of this chapter. After the flash marriage, the character collapsed. Author, Dalby in the World. Chapter 62. Chapter 62. Mom is dead. Qian Yuman was unmoved after hearing this, which was exactly what she hoped for. I just want to ask you where my mother is. If you don't tell me right away, I'll beat you until you tell me, Qian Yuman said arrogantly. Who can't do this? Secretary Zhang brought 2 black bodyguards, one by one. As powerful as a tiger, one person can knock them down with one punch. She is very worried about her mother's condition. Where did she go when she was unconscious? She doesn't know what her current situation is. Qian Chengan backed away timidly and stared at the people who were supporting Qian Yuman. Tang Yuj rushed to the ward immediately after parking the car. He happened to hear Qian Yuman's words and immediately gave an order in a cold voice. Beat him first. After receiving the instructions from their boss, Secretary Zhang, and the 3 of them came forward at the same time and beat them up. They specifically beat the 3 of them on their exposed skin, which did not hurt their internal organs. It was painful and would prevent them from seeing people for several days. Looking at her uncle's family who were beaten to the ground, Qian Yuman didn't feel guilty. They never regarded her and her mother as family members, so why should she be polite? What are guilt and intolerance? It depends on the person. It feels really good to see them being beaten, and it feels good to have revenge for years of vengeance. Qian Chengan was beaten to the ground with a swollen face and was kicked away by Secretary Zhang. Manman, don't you want to know about your mother? Qian Chengan kept dodging, but was hit by the black man one after another, his face twisted in pain. As soon as Tang Yuj raised his hand, Secretary Zhang and the others stopped. Qian Chengan covered the badly beaten area and looked at Tang Yuj with cold eyes. He recognized that this person was Qian Yuman's backstage. Qian Yuman was raising money before. She agreed to marry Mr. Lu for money, but suddenly she regretted not getting married and even made a big wedding, which made the situation difficult to recover. It seems that she found a strong backstage and solved the problem for 1 million. This time she really killed me. Qian Chengan got up from the ground with difficulty and glared at Qian Yuman with hatred. You want me to tell you where your mother is? Unless you go back with me now and continue the wedding with Mr. Lu, you will never see your mother in your life. Qian Chengan threatened Xiaoling slyly, with an ugly and distorted facial expression that made her teeth itch. Her uncle actually threatened her with her mother's safety. He was still not a human being, she was his biological sister. The smile on Tang Yuj's face instantly faded, he narrowed his eyes dangerously and spoke coldly. Beat. When Secretary Zhang heard Qian Chengan's words, he was already so angry that he wanted to beat him up. When the boss gave the order, he immediately clenched his fists and beat him crazily. He showed no mercy at all and beat him until he fell to the ground. The other 2 women wanted to save their husbands and fathers, but the black man grabbed their necks with one hand and held them against the wall. I advise you to tell her earlier, otherwise you will be beaten and unable to take care of yourself for the rest of your life, Tang Yuj said coldly. He actually asked his woman to marry another man in front of him. He was really tired of living. Qian Chengan was beaten until he vomited a mouthful of blood and kept begging for mercy. I said, stop fighting. Secretary Zhang immediately stopped, but stepped on him and glared at Qian Chengan fiercely. A bloodthirsty and cruel light flashed in his eyes, which made Qian Chengan tremble with fear. If you don't tell the truth, you won't live to see the sun tomorrow. Secretary Zhang, you are so handsome, Qian Yuman gave Secretary Zhang a thumbs up. It was so satisfying to see him bullying his uncle. Secretary Zhang was very happy to be praised and raised her chin with a little pride. When he looked at her, he saw the boss looking at him indifferently. He was so frightened that he immediately retracted his feet and stood aside. Qian Chengan clutched his chest in pain and looked at these ruthless men with timid eyes. It seemed that he had to give them an explanation today, and thinking of his loss, he was not going to have a good time, and she would not have a good time either. Your mother died the morning before yesterday. Ah. Shuaibai is still sleeping, don't wake him up. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. After the flash marriage, the character collapsed. Author, Dalby in the World. Chapter 63. Chapter 63 The Inhumane Uncle. Your mother died the morning before yesterday, Qianqiangan said indifferently, as if he was talking about an ordinary thing. It was not his sister who died, but a complete stranger. Qian Yuman, who had been arrogantly questioning her uncle just a moment ago, felt cold water pouring down her back. She stared at her uncle in disbelief, unable to digest the heartbreaking news he said. She panicked and shook her uncle's shoulders, her hands trembling, her eyes red, but she stubbornly refused to let tears fall. You lied to me, you must have lied to me. Mom will not die, how could she die? It must be her uncle who lied to her. Qianqiangan smiled cruelly. I've been beaten like this by you, why do I still need to lie to you? He died the morning before yesterday. The tumor in his brain suddenly changed and he died. He couldn't wait for surgery. The day before yesterday. Qian Yuman let go of her uncle's shoulders, took a step back and fell to the ground, tears falling from her eyes. The day before yesterday, wasn't it the day of the wedding dress trial? That afternoon she came to the hospital to look for her mother, but her aunt blocked her out. She lied to her that her mother was undergoing a checkup, and said it was unlucky for her to come to the hospital. It turned out that they were all lies, and they were all excuses. My mother had died a long time ago. I was afraid that if she knew that her mother was dead and she didn't need $1 million, she would have no reason to marry Mr. Liu, so I hid the matter. That's ridiculous, Qian Yuman roared, her beautiful face blazing with fire. You are still not a human being. You are me and not my biological uncle. Why did you lie to me like this? Qian Yuman has long known that her uncle's family is ungrateful, and her mother has been dead for 2 days, but they still hide it from her and want to use her to marry Mr. Liu to create resources and connections for them. If she hadn't met Tang Yuj, would she have foolishly married her before she knew her mother was no longer alive? She thought that no matter how ruthless her uncle was in treating them as family, at least he had taken them in as mother and daughter for the past 3 years, and there was still a trace of brother-sister feeling. Unexpectedly, they were so frantic that they concealed her mother's death so that she could not arrive as soon as possible to see her mother for the last time. My good niece, you are still so naive, Qianqiangan smiled sarcastically. The more pain Qian Yi felt, the happier he felt inside. He laughed at her for not knowing what family affection means in the face of interests. Qian Yuman took a deep breath and turned around, not wanting to see her uncle again. Tang Yuj looked at her painful appearance, held her in his arms, and gently stroked her back to comfort her. The last bit of strength in Qian Yuman's heart collapsed instantly, and she lay on his shoulder and cried loudly. Where is Qian's mother now? Tang Yuj glared at Qianqiangan murderously. Although Qianqiangan was afraid of Tang Yuj's terrifying momentum, he still said inhumane words. Want to know? Unless Manman goes back to me to get married now, you will never know where your mother is in this life, Qianqiangan said sinisterly and cunningly, with a ferocious face that made people suspect that he had a dark heart and actually took the "where is my sister's body? I came here to force my niece to get married." Tang Yuj was completely angry. He had always asked Secretary Zhang to take action before, while Qian Yuman watched indifferently and let Qian Yuman handle it. Now he couldn't help it anymore. He forced his wife to marry him again and again in front of him, treating him as dead. Yet, ugly villain Tang Yuj suddenly took out a gun and pointed it at Qianqiangan. Qianqiangan didn't expect that Tang Yuj would carry a gun with him. When he pointed the gun at him, he immediately understood that he had cornered the man. The seemingly gentle man in front of him was actually a devil, which was frightening. I have no time to post some small news, but occasionally spoil the story. Ha ha ha. End of this chapter. After the flash marriage, the character collapsed. Author, Dalby in the World. Chapter 64. Chapter 64 Mr. Tang's Anger. Secretary Zhang watched indifferently, with no intention of stopping him. He wished he could shoot him himself. This kind of inhumane person is a cancer. He saw the police approaching them. They were making a lot of noise in the hospital, so they still attracted the police. Secretary Zhang stepped forward and stood in front of Tang Yuzhi's gun. Mr. Tang, the police are here. Mr. Tang? Qian Chengan looked at Tang Yuzhi in horror, and finally understood why the man in front of him was so familiar. Wasn't he the leader of the 4 men who broke into the auditorium today? Although he didn't know who Mr. Tang was, he could guess from Mr. Liu's attentive and groveling attitude that Mr. Tang was a man with a very terrifying background. No wonder he carries a gun with him. Tang Yuzhi looked at the approaching policeman indifferently, put away his pistol and hugged Jian Yuman, who was lying on him and crying. Take the person back for questioning. Yes, Secretary Zhang immediately ordered the black people to take all 3 people away, while he stayed to deal with the police who came over and other matters. Tang Yuzhi hugged the crying Jian Yuman and walked out, taking her home directly. Jian Yuman cried all the way, and Tang Yuzhi quietly accompanied her all the way. Chao Xiaofeng, who was waiting at home, immediately ran out and saw his friend coming back crying. He immediately hugged Jian Yuman and asked Tang Yuzhi what happened with his eyes. Then I saw the Jian family members being beaten with bruises and swollen faces, and being escorted in by 2 black men, and I realized the seriousness of the problem. Take my wife back to the room to rest first, Tang Yuzhi said coldly, looking at the shivering Jian family. Chao Xiaofeng clearly took Jian Yuman back to the room to rest. Take it to the basement. Tang Yuzhi walked quickly towards the basement. Qian Chengan screamed in horror. Mr. Tang, please spare us. I don't want to die, Dad, I don't want to die, Jian Yunyun cried in fear. After all, she was still a little girl. She had never been beaten so severely and was threatened with death. The 3 people were thrown into the basement. Tang Yuzhi crossed his hands on his chest and looked down at the 3 people who fell to the ground indifferently. Behind him were 2 black thugs who were as powerful as tigers. I said, and actually. Qian Yunyun was so frightened that she blurted out the truth. My sister was cremated yesterday and buried in the mausoleum. I will take you there. Qian Chengan said it before his daughter said it. It was impossible to force Jian Yuman to marry Lu Zong. With Tang Yuzhi here, even if Jian Yuman agrees, Mr. Lu may not dare to marry her. Qian Yunyun's eyes widened, she looked at her father in surprise, and then looked at Tang Yuzhi in fear. Tang Yuzhi's eyes darkened after hearing this, and his bloodthirsty eyes shot towards Qian Chengan. Cremated? Yes, I was cremated and buried yesterday. Who gave you the qualifications to be cremated? Tang Yuzhi roared with thunder, causing Qian Yunyun to faint and fall to the ground. He roared so much that Aunt Qian collapsed on the ground and might faint at any time. Tang Yuzhi was very angry when he heard the news. Qian Yuman had already collapsed because she didn't see her mother for the last time before she died. What should she do now if she knew that she couldn't even see her mother for the last time? He didn't even know how to tell her the bad news. We know we were wrong, please spare me. Spare me, Qian Chengan knelt in front of Tang Yuzhi and kowtowed repeatedly. Spare you, Tang Yuzhi smiled cruelly, turned around and left. Without his instructions, the black thugs would give them a punishment they would never forget. Shamelessly asking for reward / End of this chapter. After the flash marriage, the character collapsed. Author, Dalby in the World. Chapter 65. Chapter 65 The Cold Tombstone. After Tang Yuzhi came back from outside, he lingered at the door of the bedroom, but did not open the door for a long time. He just came back from the cemetery and saw Qian's mother's grave. He was hesitating whether to tell her now or wait until she felt calmer. Finally he pushed the door open and went in, and saw the little woman on the bed with red eyes and clenched red lips. Even though she was heartbroken and crying in sorrow, she was still beautiful and touching. Qian Yuman stopped crying and lay silently on the bed crying. Her tears had soaked the pillow, and the sadness in her beautiful eyes made her nose sore. Chao Xiaofeng stayed with Qian Yuman for 3 hours, sometimes comforting and sometimes quietly accompanying her. When he saw Tangyuj come in, he took the initiative to leave to give them time to get along. Tangyuj looked at her crying silently with distress, and squatted down to gently wipe the tears from her face. "Let's go see my mother-in-law together." Qian Yuman looked at him with her eyes, nodded slightly, but shed more tears. Tangyuj took her hand and walked out of the villa, driving to the mausoleum in the suburbs, a 30-minute drive. It is very long for Qian Yuman, like spending a spring and autumn, looking at the increasingly remote suburbs. A possibility arises in her heart. She could have asked Tangyuj, but she still couldn't. She didn't dare, she was afraid. After getting out of the car, Qian Yuman saw the signboard of the mausoleum. Her body shook and she almost lost her balance. Fortunately, she was supported by Tangyuj. "Mother-in-law is inside." Qian Yuman was trembling all over, biting her lower lip so hard that it broke. "Let's go." Tangyuj held her hand and led her to Mother Qian's grave. She was very quiet during the process. The short walk of 100 meters was very long, but she would eventually arrive. When Qian Yuman saw Qian's mother's cemetery, the tombstone was engraved with Qian's mother's name, birth date, and death time, as well as a photo of Qian's mother smiling sweetly. Qian Yuman looks very much like her mother. Qian's mother is only 45 years old now, but she looks like a young woman less than 30 years old. People often misunderstand that they are two sisters. The two had too many happy years in the past, and the relationship between mother and daughter was particularly good. A month ago they were full of hope for the future, but within a month, they were already separated forever. After knowing the news of her mother's death, Qian Yuman could not accept the bad news for a long time, and she could not forgive herself for not being with her mother all the time and not being able to see her for the last time. She did not expect that after seeing her goodbye last time, they would meet again with a cold face. Tombstone. Why, Qian Yuman kept saying the same 3 words, kneeling in front of her mother's grave and crying bitterly. Why is God so cruel? Why did he take my mother away? Your uncle hid the matter in order to let you marry Lu Qing, and was afraid that you would go to the hospital and find your mother's body, so he buried her in a hurry, trying to hide it until after the wedding, Tangyuj explained at the side. Qian Cheng'an. I won't let you go just like that, Qian Yuman roared, tears falling continuously, and she cried bitterly while touching her mother's cold tombstone. Why wasn't she allowed to see her mother for the last time? Why was her mother buried so hastily? Are interests greater than anything else? Are interests more important than his sister's death? Interests can make him betray his conscience to conceal his mother's death and trick her into getting married. My mother was once such an outstanding and beautiful woman, with countless suitors and thousands of favors when she was young. Unexpectedly, she ended up lying alone in the cemetery, unable to open her eyes again and call her manman. She shouldn't be so miserable, she should have a wonderful second half of her life. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. After the flash marriage, the character collapsed. Author, Daobi in the World. Chapter 66. Chapter 66. I only have you now. Only mothers are good in the world. Children without mothers are like grass, which describes Qian Yuman. She was a little at a loss at the moment. Her mother, whom she was closest to, was gone, and there was a family of thousands of evil people doing evil things. She thought that after the operation tomorrow, her mother would recover and she could be taken to Tanyush's home so that she would no longer have to endure hardship and work hard to support her. Let your mother know that she married a good husband and be happy for her. Unexpectedly, there would be no chance to introduce her new husband to her, and they would be separated forever. Unconsciously, the sky darkened, and light rain fell, hitting Jianyuman, who was crying in front of the tomb, and the cold tombstone. Tanyuj has been standing quietly aside, looking at the crying woman. Even when it rains, he still stays with her and never leaves her side. The rain in the sky seemed to be infected with Jianyuman's sadness, and gradually turned from a light rain to a heavy downpour. Tanyuj knelt down and held her shoulders, comforting her easily. Go back. Let's visit my mother-in-law tomorrow. She didn't want to leave, so she stayed in front of the tombstone, crying so hard that she couldn't tell whether it was tears or rain on her face. She cried so hard that her eyes were red and swollen, like goldfish eyes, and she looked very pitiful. After crying for a while, seeing Tanyuj's soaked clothes, he no longer insisted on staying. Back home, she took a hot bath. Jianyuman, who had been crying, was tired of crying and sat on the bed with eyes blank. Tanyuj, who came back from taking a shower in the guest room, looked at her sitting blankly on the bed, stopped wiping her hair, and sat next to her. Tanyuj held her shoulders and turned her towards him. He held her chin with one hand and said seriously, "Did you put on eyeshadow? It's so red." Jianyuman looked indifferently at Tanyuj, who was wearing a bathrobe without glasses, with wet hair pulled back. "So handsome, why are you so handsome?" She was so sad, and he still seduced her. Looking at Jianyuman's indifferent look, Tanyuj touched his nose and smiled awkwardly. "Actually, your eyes look like they were punched twice. They are extremely swollen. If it were black, I might doubt your smoky eye." Jianyuman was obviously very sad, but she was amused by the man in front of her and hit him on the chest with her hand. "Is it ugly?" Tanyuj shook his head repeatedly. "Even if my wife's eyes are swollen 5 or 6 times from crying, she is still the most beautiful woman." Jianyuman's sad heart was no longer dull, and she was amused by his few words. "Mr. Tang." "Huh," Tanyuj looked at her doubtfully. "Why are you so nice to me?" She had seen his behavior today. Although she was very sad, she still felt his tenderness. He seemed to be honest, but he protected her when she was bullied by her uncle. Being her strongest backing, allowing her to deal with her uncle's family arrogantly. It is impossible not to be moved. Tanyuj had a faint smile on his lips. "You are my wife. If I am not good to you, I will not be good to anyone. I only have you now," Jianyuman said sadly. It sounded like love words, but it was very dull. "My father doesn't want me anymore, my sister doesn't want me anymore, and now even my mother doesn't want me anymore. I only have you now. I won't let you go." Tanyuj stretched out his hand and took her into his arms. "I am your husband, and you and I are wives. I will love you more than my mother-in-law, so that my mother-in-law, Izumi, can trust me and leave her daughter to me. Mr. Tang." "Let's have a child," Jianyuman said seriously. Tanyuj was so handsome in front of her, and the way he looked at her tenderly was so charming. "I didn't expect that I would update 2 chapters this morning. Do you love me more?" End of this chapter. After the flash marriage, the character collapsed. Author, Daobi in the World. Chapter 67. Chapter 67. Chapter 67. Just obey me. Others say that when you are too sad, do some exercise that is tiring, enjoyable, and sweaty. It will increase the adrenaline in your body, make you happier, and make you feel less sad. Sure enough, in this world, men can soothe all sorrows, especially top men like Tanyuj. She can't be found outside with a lantern, but it's her husband. She can do whatever she wants. Such a top-notch male act just soothes her sad heart. She has no closer relatives around her, and the closest one is her new husband. Although the two were not married for love, their relationship could be cultivated, and Tanyuj was so good. The more she looked at her husband, the more satisfied she became. Making? Do you want to play with clay? Do handicrafts? Tanyuj tilted his head and asked in confusion. Jian Yuman was speechless. He was just a fool. She said it so straightforwardly, but he didn't know. Let me teach you what it means to make a child. Jian Yuman's eyes were deep, and she looked at the handsome man in front of her with evil intentions. She swallowed hungrily, as if she wanted to eat him in the next moment. It's not like, she just wants to eat him. Jian Yuman instantly transformed into a wolf and pounced on him. Tanyuj obviously didn't expect that she would be so proactive. His eyes widened in surprise and his voice stuttered. You, what are you doing? Jian Yuman shook her head and refused. Mr. Tang, I'm so sad. I need to do something to distract myself. Tanyuj was shocked. He didn't expect that the little woman in front of him who was sad a few minutes ago would change at will and suddenly turn into a pervert. Have their roles been reversed? Why do you feel like he is the younger wife? That's right, don't you understand yet? Wife, are you sure? Yes, Jian Yuman nodded seriously. What else is there to confirm? We have been married for several days, some things must be put on the schedule. But. Tanyuj was speechless. But what? There's too much nonsense. Jian Yuman boldly leaned forward and blocked his chattering mouth with her red lips. If you really cherish life, please don't imitate Xiao Manman. Going further and further down the dirty road. Dear concubines, calm down and stop being dirty. I like it most when my concubines praise me. I almost reach heaven. I have discovered that you are falling in love with me more and more, the affection is endless. Fisheneng. End of this chapter. After the flash marriage, the character collapsed. Author, Daobi in the World. Chapter 68. Chapter 68, Little Manman behaves abnormally. The two people's eyes were glued together and they looked at each other intently. Tanyuj's mouth suddenly showed an evil smile. Jian Yuman was so handsome that she was so handsome that her saliva came to her mouth and was about to flow down. Just when she thought something was about to happen, but the reality was not like this, Tanyuj conjured a rope from nowhere and tied Jian Yuman's hands together. Jian Yuman was stunned and looked at Tanyuj in disbelief. She didn't expect him to be such a man and couldn't tell. As expected, others say that gentlemen are scum and scum, not human beings. However, Jian Yuman still guessed wrong. Tanyuj climbed out of bed and stood beside the bed. Honey, I think you behaved strangely tonight and need time to calm down. I will go to the guest room to sleep tonight. Tanyuj gave Jian Yuman a meaningful look and turned away without hesitation, as if he was avoiding the plague. Jian Yuman was completely dumbfounded. She opened her mouth so wide that she could even put an egg in it. What's the situation? Don't want to continue. Why did you leave? Tanyuj, calm down sister, why are you running away? Jian Yuman roared angrily, but unfortunately she disappeared without a trace, and I am afraid I didn't even hear what she said. Looking at her tied hands, Jian Yuman sighed sadly. Jian Yuman looked resentful. It took her 20 minutes to untie her tie and ran to find Tanyuj. He actually locked the room, just to guard against wolves. Should you buy him anti-wolf spray next time? Jian Yuman bared her teeth and made a face at the closed door, and went back to her room to sleep dejectedly. After the torment at night, Jian Yuman was in a much better mood and tried not to think about Jian's mother, because as long as she thought of her mother, her tears would be uncontrollable. Early morning the next day. Jian Yuman had an uneasy sleep last night. She always had nightmares and was very tired after a night. Wife Tangyuj pushed Jian Yuman and called her. Jian Yuman sat up sleepily, looking ahead blankly. She stretched out her hand to rub her eyes, but it hurt and she closed them immediately. She cried all day yesterday and her eyes were still swollen. Jian Yuman glanced at Tangyuj and suddenly remembered what happened last night. Instantly, the anger in her heart began to burn. When she was about to get angry, Tangyuj interrupted her seriously. Wife, your mother is not dead, your uncle lied to you. Ha ha ha. Little Manman transforms into a pervert and fails to seduce Mr. Tang, and overwhelms Mr. Tang's path in Luxing Manman and the journey away. Smash your recommendation votes. 4 updates today. No matter how many recommendation votes there are, it will be updated. Just because I was awakened by handsomeness today. Drop a vote to support me, feel free to drop it. If you smash too much, Mr. Tang will be given to Xiao Manman to ravage tomorrow. End of this chapter. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. After the flash marriage, the character collapsed. Author, Daobi in the World. Chapter 69. Chapter 69 The Mysterious Man. Honey, your mother is not dead, your uncle lied to you, Tangyuj said. Jian Yuman's inner anger was instantly extinguished by his words. She jumped up from the bed, grabbed his hand and asked anxiously. Did I hear what you just said correctly? My mother is not dead. I just received Secretary Zhang's investigation report, confirming that your mother is not dead, look at it. Tangyuj played a video on his mobile phone, which was recorded by the hospital's surveillance camera. The scene in the video flashed by, showing a group of people taking Mother Jian away from the hospital. Although the figure in the picture was very small, she could still recognize at a glance that it was her mother who was lying on the hospital bed and being taken away. Looking at the time in the upper left corner of the video, it turned out to be 10 p.m. the night before she tried on a wedding dress. My mother was taken away the day before. How come she died in the hospital the next day? Jian Yuman said something strange. Tangyuj narrated what happened during the investigation. It turns out that when Tangyuj interrogated Jian Chengan yesterday, Jian Yunyun once looked at her father in surprise when Jian Chengan told him the whereabouts of Jian's mother. Even though it happened in a flash, Tangyuj still remembered it and kept it in mind. After that, Secretary Zhang was sent to conduct an in-depth investigation. At first, no problems were found in the investigation. It was not until I saw the surveillance video that I was sure that Jian's mother was not dead. The strangest thing is the surveillance at the same time. There is not a single picture of Jian Mama leaving the hospital. There are many surveillance cameras from Jian Mama leaving the hospital, but all of them have been deleted. It's not that the video at the door is small and short, not attracting attention. If you don't watch it carefully, you won't know it's Mama Jian at all, so it avoids being deleted. After that, Secretary Zhang immediately went to the dean to ask, but he kept silent and insisted that Jian's mother died of illness. It was only after threatening the dean that he was willing to reveal that a big shot had taken Mother Jian away and delete all traces of their visit. The hospital was only asked to keep the identity of Jian Mama and others who were taken away secret, but they were not asked to spread rumors about Jian Mama's death. It was Uncle Jian's idea to fake his death, and his purpose was to deceive Jian Yuman and make her marry Mr. Lu obediently. He also asked the hospital to cooperate with him in saying that Jian Mama faked her death, otherwise the hospital would be held accountable and exposed for allowing outsiders to take patients away without authorization. The hospital was also afraid, so they cooperated with my uncle and faked Jian's mother's death. It is basically certain that Mother Jian is not dead and was taken away by a group of mysterious people. After listening to Tangyuj's words, Jian Yuman's eyes filled with tears. Mom is not dead, that's great, all this is false. Now all that's left is to question your uncle. I'm asking for your permission to open the fake tombstone of my mother-in-law to confirm that Jianchenggan is lying. Jian Yuman wiped the tears on her face. She should be happy now. Her mother is not dead. She can't cry anymore. I'm going to take my uncle with me. Tangyuj and the others took Jianchenggan to the cemetery with them. They still had shovels in their hands. After yesterday's torture, Jianchenggan's face looked ugly when they arrived at the destination. They had already guessed that the lie had been exposed. Jian Yuman came to her mother's grave, holding a shovel in her hand, and looked at her uncle who was kneeling on the ground and shivering. Uncle, you'd better ask for the truth. Is my mother dead? The tough-talking Jianchenggan immediately pointed to Jian's mother's grave. The tomb is here, and you still ask me if I am dead. Jian Yuman really wanted to lift the shovel and beat him up, but she was too weak to lift it. Then how about I dig the grave myself and see if my mother's ashes are inside? If I open it and find out if there is any, I will immediately have someone bury you in it and make it your tomb. End of this chapter. After the flash marriage, the character collapsed. Author, Daobi in the World. Chapter 70. Chapter 70 Collecting the Money for Selling Oneself. Jianchenggan saw the shovel in Jian Yuman's hand, and all the cells in his body began to hurt. The abuse he suffered last night was still in his mind. Don't hit me, don't bury me. I admit it. I admit that I lied to your mother and died. Jian Yuman returned the shovel to Secretary Zhang and personally admitted the news that her mother was not dead from her uncle's mouth. The sorrow in her heart disappeared instantly, and her eyes turned slightly red because of the excitement. Hateful, she cried all day in vain yesterday, and her eyes are still swollen. Manman, for the sake of me being your uncle, let me go. Uncle, please. Jianchenggan spinelessly crawled to Jian Yuman's feet on his knees and tried to pull her skirt, but was caught by Tangyuj. If you tell me honestly, I will let you, your wife and your children go. Tangyuj walked to Jian Yuman, put his arm around her shoulders and gently comforted her. Upon hearing this, Jianchenggan happily explained. A group of mysterious people came to me and said they wanted to take my sister away. They said they wanted to treat my sister. They also gave me a sum of money to prevent me from telling anyone. They blamed me for being greedy and wanting to use Manman to give her a cure. To bring greater benefits to myself, I lied about my sister's death. Jianchenggan's idea is very simple, that is, to use his sister to get Jian Yuman to marry Mr. Liu. In order to conceal that her sister had been taken away for medical treatment, and fearing that Jian Yuman would not marry if she found out, he first prevented her from going to the hospital to see Jian's mother. Afraid that she would not be able to hide it, she specially found a cemetery. When Jian Yuman found out that her mother was missing, everything was cooked. If she could lie to her for the rest of her life. As long as the goal is achieved and huge benefits are obtained, such small tricks don't matter to Jianchenggan. Jianchenggan never expected that Jian Yuman would settle for 1 million and even cause a scene at the wedding. In the end, the lie was exposed and he was severely punished. The final evidence showed that Jian's mother was not dead, and Jian Yuman's mood was also ups and downs. I am heartbroken to know that my mother is dead, and I am very happy to know that my mother is alive, but where is my mother alive? Who took Jian Mama away? Is the purpose of taking Jian Mama away really to cure a disease? Was the operation successful? How is Mother Jian doing now? Jian Yuman couldn't get the answer. Jianchenggan's family was released and they also received spiritual and physical lessons. Tangyuj directly sent people to move the luggage of Jian Yuman and his daughter from Uncle Jian's house. After this incident, he completely cut off all contact with Uncle Jian's family. Jian Yuman does not intend to continue to take revenge on Uncle Jian. The trouble she has brought to Jianchenggan's family is enough to give them a headache for a while. How will Mr. Liu account for the expensive wedding dress? Jian Yuman did not intend to pursue the matter, but Tanyuj was not so generous. He tried to force his wife to marry him several times in front of him. How could he let him go like this? He specifically called Mr. Lu and asked him to take good care of Qianzhenggan's family and pursue what should be pursued. I believe Qianzhenggan will not have an easy life in the future, and it will be difficult for him to stay in San Francisco. Back home, Qian Yuman hugged Tanyuj's arm hard and said seriously, "Mr. Tang, you must help me find my mother's whereabouts." Tanyuj said with a slight smile, "I will. This is your business too. Of course, your mother is also my mother." Qian Yuman shook his head and said very seriously, "It's not this. The people who took my mother away also took away the 1 million I paid. That was the money I sold to you as my wife. In order to buy me, you didn't have much money. Now our family assets are only mine. I got 300,000 yuan from my uncle, so we have to recover 1 million yuan. Tanyuj's mouth twitched slightly, and he felt helpless as he looked at the serious face in front of him. "Little miser. I'm going out to pave the road and eat some delicious food. The next update will be before 12 o'clock. If it's too late, I'll make it up tomorrow. Love me, End of this chapter.